You're watching Good on Paper, a bookish channel. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Rachel.
Join us as we journey together into the land of fiction, where the men are brave, the quests are epic, and everything is better on paper.
Hello again, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
We're here to talk about books this week instead of writing for a change.
So this should be more fun, right? Reading is always fun. More fun than writing.
Yeah, when I talk about my own writing, sometimes I give myself like a little bit of like panic attacks while I'm even talking about it. So this is a good reprieve from talking about writing. Yes.
So, how did your January go on the reading front? Did you read a lot? Was it kind of more on the back burner? I know for me, months I'm either reading a ton or it's just kind of like on the side thing.
Yeah. I did not read as much as I usually do because since I was going to write the third Legends of Avalon book right now, I was going to make myself read the first two so that I could mark things that I needed to remember or, plot lines I needed to tie up and all that kind of stuff. But of course, I write very long books, so they take a long time to finish. And so anyway, so I didn't read as much as I normally do. I read, I think, 8 books in the month of January, which is not a whole lot for me. It's not bad, but normally I read like a book, maybe 2 a week. So this week or this month, well, I guess that wasn't bad this month. Yeah, it wasn't bad, and actually I liked all but 2 of them, so that's nice.
That is really nice.
Yeah.
So I think my average is normally 8 books or fewer a month. So, and this month I think I read 17 or so. So
oh my God.
We flip-flopped because I do not normally read so much. I think the most I've ever read last year, I read 12 books in 1 month. But the secret for me is I went to the library and I checked out a bunch of books. And when they're from the library, they have a due date. And I think I like reading physical books. I think that makes me read faster. And they were all really good books for the most part. They're popular books, I should say. So, I had the Red Queen series. I had Howl's Moving Castle. I had the Folk of the Air, the Cruel Prince series. So a lot of them were just really fun to read.
Yeah.
And they had to be due, or they were due. They were going to be due. They were going to be due, but even so, I still really enjoyed reading them.
Yeah. So. That does help when there's a due date and you're like, or if you're doing like a buddy reader or book club and you're like, okay, I have to finish this in a certain. I don't usually have a hard time finishing a book or reading quickly if I like it. It's if I'm not invested. I DNF a lot because I'm like, if I get halfway through and I don't like it, I just get to the end to see how it ends because I want to know, and then I just return it because I don't care. Like I'm not gonna waste my time.
Yeah, and I did DNF a couple books, so there's that too.
I did not DNF any. There was 2 that I did finish that I did not really care for. But I was like already so far into it by the time I realized I didn't really like it that I was like, well, whatever.
Yeah, you're just like, well, we might as well see what happens,
Yeah, I mean, I probably more like skim read the end, but still.
Yeah. Okay, so what was your top favorite book that you read this month?
Oh, that's easy actually. Well, technically, I haven't finished it on purpose because I don't know for sure if the third one's going to come out sooner than they say it will. So I don't want to finish it until it's close. So I have like 3 chapters left or something. I'm like at 80% or something like that because I'm like, I don't want to read the ending and get like irritated about how it ends. So I'm just going to wait until it's close. Because like I know it's a K.M. Shea book, which is one of my all-time favorites, especially for urban fantasy. She does it so well. And it's her newest, the one I just am reading, not quite finished with, is The King's Shadow. It's the second one in this trilogy. So good. I loved the first one. I devoured it like that because I knew the next one was coming out in January. Well, the third one isn't scheduled to come out until March. And so I'm like, I mean, that's not that long. I mean, because it's a rapid release, so it's really not that far. But I'm like, well, I want to read it. So I read it all the way up to 80%. And I'm like, I know there's going to be like some kind of fallout or something some kind of like, climactic moment that I'm not going to like. So I'm like, I'm just going to wait to finish that. And then that way I can finish it really quickly and then read the third one and find, the happy ending that I want to have. So I haven't finished it yet, technically.
I could not do that. I don't think I could just leave the ending hanging there. I don't think I would be physically capable.
Well, because I know that, like, classically, it's like 80% or so, the couple either is going to break up or there's going to be some kind of like conflict or there's going to be a reason they can't be together. And I'm like, but they're so close to getting together. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to be irritated that they're not together. So in my mind, they're still together until I read the third book. So I'm saving myself the stress, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I hope that it comes out on schedule and you get to read it soon.
Yes. I hope it comes out early because it's so good.
So what is it about? Like, why should I read it?
So she has three other trilogies in this same world. And so it's an urban fantasy. It takes place in this fictional city that's in the U.S. And it's this world in which fantasy creatures are integrated into our society. So like there's fae, there's vampires, there's werewolves, there's elves, and they're all a part of our world. And so like humans are like in awe of all of these fantasy creatures. And it's very like humanized in a way because like the vampires have like their own like systems of like not necessarily government, but like laws and rules and things they follow, and like same with the fae and everybody. So it's very, very like humanized in the sense that they have like a government and they have like, it's called the Curia Cloisters, is this group that like, polices people and stuff. So anyway, the world is great. I love it. I loved the first 3 series, but this one has been my favorite actually. And the main character is a girl who doesn't belong to any of the magical factions because there's nobody else like her, and she has the ability to turn into a cat, just a house cat. And like she's been tested and they're like, we can't find out what species you are. So she just doesn't have a group, which unfortunately means for her that she also has no protection because there's no group she belongs to. So like for like any like bad fantasy creatures, she's like fair game because she has nobody to like run to. Well, then walk in Noctis, the Elf King, who thinks she's a cat. He like finds her as a cat and doesn't realize that she can turn into a person too. And he takes her as his pet. And so she's like, and like elves have like this reputation for being really terrifying, and the rest of the community doesn't even know that they still exist. So they've like waged wars and stuff, so they're scary to everybody. So anyway, so she's pretending to be the house cat of this very scary elf king, and drama ensues, and she realizes he's not that scary and all that kind of stuff. So it's great. I love it.
Oh, that sounds really good. I'm going to have to put that on my Goodreads now. Because, like I said, I haven't read any K.M. Shea books ever.
So and I will say that some of her regular fantasy series frustrate me because she takes too long for me, like from book to book, to get to the points that I want to happen. Like her romance happens slower than I would like it to. But other than that, I really, really like her.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm really on a roll, like, with this reading. I want to just keep reading books that I love. So I'm already, like, trying to make a list for February, what I want to get from the library, what I can get elsewhere. But so my favorite book, I'll say book series that I read this month was, I read the Cruel Prince trilogy, which have you read those?
Yeah.
So I had never read, I know they're super big, but I just never read them. And I think part of the secret to really liking a book is thinking you're not going to like it. That is a huge, huge thing, because I just never read them because I've seen, mixed reviews on them, and I thought, oh, I'm not going to like this, because I didn't like A Court of Thorns and Roses. I did not like Serpent and Dove, I think it is. So there's a few popular books that I haven't liked.
Yeah.
So I just brushed it off. Oh, this is a popular series. It must be awful because it's popular. But I thought, well, I might as well read them, because I think I was just browsing at the library and they had it. They had the first one, which for a popular series, sometimes it can be hard to get. So I thought, well, I might as well grab it now. And I was obsessed. They were so good. I think my biggest draw was that the fairyland it feels very traditional to, Celtic fairy mythology. It's not like, in A Court of Thorns and Roses, it's kind of like the Twilight-esque of fairies. They're just these sparkly, good-looking people kind of thing. That's how I felt with ACOTAR. But, so this is Holly Black, and I don't know, did you read her Spiderwick Chronicles when you were young? So I read those, and I like them, and they're illustrated, and they're kind of dark, and they're kind of like the Fae, they're kind of darker and old world and a little kind of gruesome. I don't know how to explain it. They're not super beautiful specimens. They have their own little look, and they're kind of like bugs. I don't know how to describe it. They just have that feel to it, where it's kind of the old world Fae, where fairies were not good. They would trick you.
Yeah.
So reading it, the world felt very much like I was reading, an old Celtic fairy story.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was a YA book, so it didn't feel like that, but the world felt like that.
Yeah.
And then the main character is human, but her older half-sister is half Fae, and her father comes to collect her, and he takes the two human half-sisters with him and raises them as Fae in the kingdom. And I just really liked the main character, which is crazy because she is one of your badass kind of warrior, spy, assassin girl characters, which I normally don't relate to. But I thought Jude, the main character, was done really well because she has been in fairy for so long that it's more home to her than the human world, but she's human, so she feels like she never fits in. And so she has that human aspect to her that I really related to. And her relationship with her stepfather is so interesting. I mean, I actually really, really liked these books. In the second and third book, I actually got into the whole, because the love interest is a bad boy prince. And so in the first book, I was kind of like, whatever, because that's not my thing. But in the second and third books, I actually started getting into it. I was like, I love Prince Carden. Oh my gosh, I love their relationship. Total fangirl, which I did not expect myself to do. I thought I would hate it. I thought I would think it was stupid, but I really liked it. And then I read the little illustrated book that's like his backstory, and I just loved that. And it was the first time I read, because I'm not into series normally because they stress me out. Yeah. Because I'm like, oh my gosh. But I thought it was a series, 5, 6 books. And then I found out it was a trilogy, and I was so upset. So I was like, I need more of this. And I know there's more books, but I want more of just Carden and Jude, like how they were. And I just wish there was like 12 books of them. But that's okay. Sometimes stories come to an end, and you can't like drag them out anymore. Otherwise it ruins it. So. But yeah, that was my top read of the month.
That is the best thing, when you don't expect to have, like, you love something. Like, either you expect you're not going to like it, or you have zero expectations because you don't know anything about it. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is my new favorite. That's the best feeling. So good. Yeah. Love that.
What was your least favorite book of the month?
Oh, see, on Instagram, a lot of people are like, writers will also do like book reviews and stuff. I never talk about books because I don't like I hear it's different, I guess, because this isn't like somewhere you're like posting reviews, but I just don't like to make anybody feel bad that either A, you're not one of my favorites, or B, you're one of the ones I didn't like. But I don't think this author's going to watch or listen to this anyway. I read mostly fantasy is like my thing. I love fantasy more than anything, but when I can't find a good fantasy book, I'll read something else. And so I read a proper romance that people were talking about, and I like some proper romance. I had mixed feelings about this book. It was The Earl's Hideaway, No Ladies Allowed, by Esther Hatch. I had never read anything by her ever before. And like, there were aspects, and then I ended up reading the second one, or no, the first one, because this one was book 2, and I hadn't read the first one, and so then I went back and read the first one also, which I liked the second one better, but I wasn't like a huge fan of either one personally. They were okay. It's supposed to be, this second one that I read was supposed to be about this Earl who he has, oh gosh, I can't remember how many sisters, but a ton of sisters who are all like all the time giving him a bad time and like teasing him and like playing pranks and all kinds of different stuff. And he's just like done with it. He's like, I'm always the nice brother. I always put up with everything. For once, I just want to get away and be alone. And so he goes to his solicitor and is like, hey, do you know anywhere I could go and be alone? And he's like, well, this guy needs someone to look after his plants for like a month or two or whatever. You could go stay at his house. And so he's like, perfect. So the Earl goes and stays at this house. Well, come to find out, this girl walks in the door and it's the young woman that he used to be like super into when they were kids, and it's her uncle's house. And she was going to come and take care of the plants. But there's like a miscommunication that nobody knew this. So they end up staying at this house together for like the month or two or whatever it is. I did like their back and forth because he's been into her all these years, but he thought she didn't love him anymore, and she thought he didn't love her anymore. So I did like their back and forth to an extent, but there was quite a few things I didn't love, which for me, when a book has a couple that you're supposed to be rooting for, but you don't really get to be a part of those interactions very much. Like, I guess when an author tells me this couple had a conversation, but I don't get to read the conversation, I don't buy it. And that's how it went. Like, there was, they had some interactions, but I just felt like they were supposedly falling in love, but I didn't really get to witness them falling in love. And I have like a pet peeve about that, where I'm like, if I don't get to be there for the interactions, then to me they didn't happen. So I'm not rooting for this couple because I didn't actually see them be together. And then the other thing it did that I didn't love was it did the whole 75% mark breakup thing, which I know that romance books do a lot, but some of them do it better than others. And this one I didn't understand the reason for the breakup. It made no sense to me. I was like, why are you breaking up? And then they wait like a month or two or something like that. I can't remember how long. And then they get back together. And I'm like, wait, why did you guys wait to get back together? I'm so confused right now. And then when I read the first book, like a couple weeks later, I was even more frustrated because it ended the exact same way, where they broke up at the same point in time for similarly unrealistic reasons and then got back together at a certain point later in the story. And it was like, this is exactly the same ending. And actually, I liked the first book less because the couple was less believable to me. But yeah, I'm a picky reader, I think, too. But yeah, that was I finished both of them because by the time I got, far enough into it to realize I wasn't in love with it, I was like, well, let's just skim read to the end. So, but yeah, those were my least favorites of the month.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I guess my really least favorite has to be the one that I actually did DNF. So that one was, what is it called? Yeah, let me look up. It was by Alexa Donne, like Donne. Okay, so it was called The Stars We Steal. And I wanted to like this book so bad. It is a Jane Eyre retelling set in space.
Oh.
Yeah. And so there was a lot I really liked about it.
Yeah.
But as I was reading, so I read, I don't know, maybe the first couple chapters. The thing I particularly didn't care for is I just felt like it was to the authors, I don't know, it just didn't feel organic with the message of the story. It felt a little too heavy-handed for me. So the thing I like about reading is, people are diverse. Everybody has different opinions, different philosophies, different ways of looking at the world, different religions, different moral, I don't want to say moral compasses because everybody's moral compass generally tends to be, but there can be some differences. We'll put it out there. And I don't mind reading a book that has somebody's moral compass like is totally different than my own. I don't necessarily mind that as long as it flows kind of organically. But with this book, at some point, I felt like I was reading some opinion piece article Like one of the characters said, well, not every person has to have children, and actually something, something, something. And I just felt like I was reading some opinion piece that you'd see on social media. And it really, it doesn't have anything to do with whether I agree with that or not. Obviously, people probably know me. I don't really agree with, you know, all the raw feminist stuff. That's generally not my thing. But because this is something that bothers me too in Christian books. I mean, I'm a Christian, but when they're so heavy-handed that it feels like you're reading a sermon in the book, I put that book away because I don't want to read a nonfiction opinion piece. If I wanted to read that, I'd read it. I want to read an authentic lived experience. So I thought I want to like this book so bad, but I just couldn't do it. It felt like I was reading like some opinion piece article, which is really sad because I love the premise so much. And there was a lot I did like about it, but unfortunately the pros did not outweigh the cons in that situation. I DNF'd it.
Sad. Yeah.
I know. It is really sad to DNF books. You know, it really is.
Yeah. That's like, I almost have this like irrational fear of reading sometimes where I'm like, well, I don't want to read because what if I don't like it? Yeah. And I hate reading something that I don't like. Like it sucks to open. It's almost like it's a heartbreak in a way. Like you're so excited and you have these hopes and then you just get let down and disappointed that it's not what you thought it would be or it's not your thing or whatever. Like I'm just like, I don't want to do that again. So then I just reread the same stuff again because I get tired of, you know, not liking things.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes that puts me into a reading slump because you just feel so hopeless. You feel like, oh, what if I can't find a good book and everything's just going to be awful, you know? So let's see. So we did least favorite, most favorite. Let's see. Did you read like all indie or all traditionally published or
to be completely honest, I do not remember the last traditionally published book I read ever. Like because I've mentioned before, I took like a reading break for years and I just started reading again, 2020, I think. And in those last 3 years, The Hobbit has been a traditionally published, but other than that, because I read Kindle Unlimited exclusively. My thing is, I read Kindle Unlimited, and if I love the book, I buy it on paperback so I can read it again. And so that's how I read. And so most things on Kindle Unlimited are indie authors. So that's literally all I read.
See, if I really thought about getting Kindle Unlimited this month, but I know myself, and when it's on my Kindle, I don't know what it is. I just don't read as much. I don't enjoy it as much. So I didn't. And I do have a couple of indie authors' books that I have never read before that I actually bought the physical copy of. So that's because I'm really the same way. I do not buy a book unless I like it. I did buy your book, but I've also read you before, so I know I like your stuff. So maybe that's a little different. But yeah, because I just got the Grinch Next Door, and now I'm debating. I'm like, do I want to save this for Christmas? But I don't think I can. I don't even think I can save it for Christmas in July. Like I feel like I'm gonna read it.
Oh, that's true. There is Christmas in July. I forgot about that. Yeah. But I can't save a book to save my life.
What's that?
I can't save a book, like not read it to save my life. If it's there, I'm reading it.
Yeah, I'm gonna read it. I only read one indie book this month actually, and it was an ARC copy or ARC copy, advanced reader copy. We'll just throw it all out there. It was Morgan Hubbard's book that's coming out. It's called This Cursed Line, and it was so cool. It's kind of like a historical fantasy western.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think you would like it. So it's about this guy who is, for generations of his family, is enslaved to work for the devil. So, because you know how, like, I don't know, like, to me, like, the devil and westerns, just, it goes hand in hand. like, like The Devil Went Down to Georgia. It has like those kind of vibes.
Yeah.
And it's really good. Like, honestly, my only complaint with it was I wanted more. I think it's about 80,000. It's like a pretty like standard read, but I wanted it to be an epic. Like, that's how much I was like in love with the story in the world. I was like, I want backstory and I want all of this and all of that. So I don't know. I think if there's like a sequel or if the author's going to do more in the world, I am not sure, but I hope she does, because I really liked it. Like I said, it had the morally gray protagonist, obviously, because he works for the devil, and it's kind of about how he gets free.
Oh, okay.
So I recommend that. This Cursed Line by Morgan Hubbard. It comes out, I should know this because I'm on her street team. I think it's in March. I don't know, but we'll link everything. So we'll link all these books that we talked about, and I'll probably like link her Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
If that interests you guys. I'm trying to think. Let's see. So we did least favorite, most favorite. We talked about indie versus traditionally published. Let me just like look at my Goodreads. I don't know. Is there another book that you want to talk about? Like one that you think I should read?
I will say, I mean, I had some that I liked. There was only one other one that I was like, I really, really, really liked. And it was Stoneheart by Megan M. Simpson.
Stoneheart?
Mm-hmm. Stoneheart.
Okay.
Which I had never heard of her before. I think, no, actually I did follow her on Instagram before this, but I had never read any of her books before.
Mm-hmm.
And it just came up as recommended on Kindle Unlimited, and I was like, sure, why not? We'll do it. And it won't be for everybody, just because it's a romance. It's kind of a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, but it's not heavy on the romance at all, which I love Beauty and the Beast retellings. They're like my favorite.
Me too!
But, so the romance is not at all heavy. I mean, they kiss like twice, and it's like not descriptive at all. It's just like they kissed, which everybody's different. Personally, I like a little bit more than that. Like I like to like, I want to feel like giddy about it when they kiss, like I want to be like really excited. But I also don't like anything spicy, so I'm like kind of in an odd spot. But anyway, so it's not super heavy on the romance, but it's about this young woman who, she lives with her aunt and uncle and her two cousins, and her uncle has like made these really bad business deals, and so now he owes, I believe it's a baron or something like that, some kind of leader in the area. He owes them a bunch of money, and so he's going to give his niece away as a slave to pay it off. And he is in the woods traveling home one day, and he comes by this castle, and he tries to take something to use as payment, and this guy who is like a living statue catches him and is like, you owe me now, and tells him to bring someone of his household back to him. And so instead of giving his niece to the baron or whatever, he gives her to this stone guy in the castle. And the stone guy in the castle did it because he knew that the uncle was going to trade her off as payment, so he was trying to save her. But anyway, so I think what I like about Beauty and the Beast retellings is that they're so simple, because they usually take place in one location, and it's usually more about the relationship and the growth of the characters, which I just really like. And I liked the growth of the characters. I like that she has kind of like her own secret, I won't spoil it, but she has like her own secret backstory situation going on that he doesn't know anything about yet, which turns into its own conflict. And at first she's like totally disinterested in knowing him at all, and he's been this way for hundreds of years, so he's already kind of softened as a person. But they have, I wouldn't call it like a enemies to lovers. I would say like maybe frenemies to lovers, a little bit softer. But yeah, just like the progression of their relationship is super sweet. That I really like that. And like it does have a conflict, and it does come to like an exciting moment towards the end of the story. But it's not like, oh, I'm not good enough for her, I just let her run away and then I go and get her. Like, it's a different spin on it that I really liked. So anyway, it's really cute. It was just, not super long or anything, but yeah, it was a surprise. I think that was one of the ones where I had no expectations, and then I ended up really enjoying it. And I was like, oh, okay. So I actually just signed up to be an ARC reader for her next book, because I was like, sure, if it's anything like this one, I think I'll like it.
I love Beauty and the Beast Retelling. Like when you said that, I thought, oh, when's the last one I read? And I thought it was, so I was a beta reader for one of my friends, and she's writing kind of a Beauty and the Beast mixed with another fairy tale retelling, which I really hope she finishes soon because I need this book. You know how how it is when you're friends with all these writers. You're like, please, I need to read your book. So yeah, Casey, if you're listening, please finish your book in a loving way. I mean that nicely. Don't stress yourself out, but finish your book. But I realized I actually read a Beauty and the Beast retelling this month. I read, this was my month of reading all the popular books that I'm behind on. I read Uprooted by Naomi Novik, and I just returned it to the library because, well, that's okay because I know this goes onto the podcast. Not everybody's watching. I was going to show you guys the cover because it's so pretty, but I'm doing you a favor. I don't have it with me, so if you're on the podcast, you're not missing out. I'm not showing the cover. But anyway, go look at the cover. It's called Uprooted, and it was really good. It reminded me a lot of Beauty, which is Robin McKinley's retelling. It kind of gave me the Bear and the Nightingale vibes, which is the Russian kind of fairy tale one because it's a Polish kind of setting, and it's like I don't know if I felt like it was historical fantasy actually set in old Poland, but it could also be like set in a Poland inspired world. I'm not quite sure what the author is going for. I don't think it matters. It really doesn't. Yeah. But it was good, and it really reminded me of, weirdly enough, it reminded me of Rebecca. I don't know if you've ever read that, Daphne du Maurier. Yeah, it just reminded me the relationship of, because she's 17 and the guy is older. Mm-hmm. And just like their relationship reminded me of the relationship in Rebecca, which is kind of a Jane Eyre retelling. I think it's written in the 30s. So that's another good one to read. If you like Jane Eyre and like kind of gothic, old school stuff, that's a good one. But something about, I think it was the voice and their relationship reminded me a lot of Rebecca, which is weird because totally different genres here. Yeah. But now that I think about it, Jane Eyre kind of is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. If you really think about it, it's very similar. But yeah, I really liked it. The only thing I didn't like is I liked how their relationship was kind of very cool and slow burn. Except the only thing that kind of ruined it for me is it was like their relationship was so casual, but of course they had casual sex. And I was like, because I didn't want them to be head over heels in love with each other, because like that's just not, just their personalities. I liked that they were like more like standoffish with each other, but the fact that they had sex with it kind of ruined it for me. And of course, that's a me thing. Yeah. Like, because personally, that doesn't go with my morals. Yeah. So, it's not going to be an issue for everybody. Some people might really like that. Just for me, I was like, okay, this is kind of gross. Yeah. But other than that, I really liked it. Yeah. I thought at one point that because it starts off really slow, and I loved it. It was very like slow and descriptive, and I felt myself sinking into the world. And then about after the midpoint, it got so action heavy. I was like, I feel like this is like crammed too much. I was like, maybe this should be a trilogy, because it lost some of what I really liked, the fact that it was like this kind of slow world. But when I got to the end, I kind of understand why she did that, because the ending was it went back to that slow, like lyrical thing, and it almost reminded me of like the Lord of the Rings, or like watching the end of like watching some great epic. It just had that feel to it, and I understand why it was so action heavy like that, to the point where I didn't like it, because I feel like the ending being so slow and beautiful and lyrical would have lost something if we hadn't come from that place. Yeah. So my opinion changed after I finished the book. But yeah, I definitely recommend that book. What was it? Uprooted by Naomi Novik. If you like Beauty and the Beast retellings. Yeah.
See, comparing it to Jane Eyre, I'm like nodding and I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Because honestly, you haven't read Jane Eyre?
Listen, I am a terrible bookstagram girl. I have read The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and The Chronicles of Narnia. Beyond that, I have never read a classic book in my life. I've read some Shakespeare in high school, but other than that, nothing. Not at all.
Okay, yeah.
None.
Yeah, because they don't, I mean, even the high school classics, they're generally, it's like Of Mice and Men. There's not a lot of, because I've read a lot of female author classics. I have not read most of the ones that, you know, you study in literature class. Like I've read Little Women. Yeah. I've read every single Jane Austen. I've read the Bronte sisters. I've read Anne of Green Gables. I've read all like the standard female classics. Yeah. But like my sister, she's read Steinbeck and James Joyce. And yeah, like, ew, ew, not for me.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, so
I'll
funny.
stick to Little Women, thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. If you were gonna read a classic, my favorite is Little Women. That's what I would say. If you wanted to read a Bookstagram classic, I would say start with Little Women. But there's also Jane Austen too. That's always fun.
Yeah, I was telling a friend the other day, I feel like as a romance person, I should have read Jane Austen. And of course, I've seen Pride and Prejudice 27,000 times. But I remember getting Pride and Prejudice from the library when I was like 14 or something. Of course, at that time, that's when I had like really started reading, and I was reading like a bunch of like YA fantasy, and there wasn't any kissing. And I was like, I just skimmed through it to see what the end looked like before I even started reading it, just because I wanted to know how similar it was to the movie. And I was like, they don't even kiss? I was like, forget this. And I just didn't read it. Of course, now I have a lot more patience, but at the time I was like, there's no kissing, I'm not reading it, which is just kind of funny.
I think Pride and Prejudice was the first one I read, and I was around that age. I might have been a little younger. I might have been 12. And so I read it, but I feel like I didn't get a whole lot out of it. Whereas even being a little bit older, like I think I read Sense and Sensibility when I was 15, 16. And I got so much more out of it. And I actually just reread Sense and Sensibility now, last year at 27. And I feel like the older you get, there's so much in Jane Austen that it's all these tiny little social cues, kind of, not social cues, because that's real life. What is it when you take social cues and you put it into a book? Like these little social I can't talk. You know what I'm trying to say? Intricacies.
Okay.
Intricacies. When you take social intricacies and you put them into a book. So that's what Jane Austen really is. So by the time I was 16, I picked up on a lot more of that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so much like my social group or my social life. And then when I was 27 reading it again, and they're talking about, you know, the family inheritance and how families interact with money. And that's a very adult experience, you know, when somebody passes away and there's money left. And at 27, I have so much more experience with, you know, people who've been through that kind of a thing. So it just really hits home. And it just makes you feel like, wow, the early 1800s were exactly like now. Like there is no difference. So I definitely think Jane Austen is, you know, as an adult is great because there's just so much, and it's just little stuff, little everyday stuff that everybody deals with. But you're right, there's not a lot of kissing, you know. That's not the big draw.
I remember when I was 10 was the first time I ever watched Pride and Prejudice, and I've never seen, please don't come for me guys, I've never seen the Colin Firth version ever, because when I was 10 we went to Hollywood Video to pick out movies for a movie night with another woman my mom was friends with. And I walked past and I saw Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley on the shelf. I knew nothing about it. I had no idea what this was. I don't even think I read the back of it, but I was like, this looks interesting. And so I picked it out at 10. And we went home and watched it that night with my mom's friend. And I was in love. And I demanded that we buy the DVD. And I watched that thing over and over. And at 10, I had no idea what they were talking about 90% of that movie. Like, so much of it was like gibberish to me. It made no sense. But even without understanding everything, I understood the concept of what was going on, like, between these two people. Like, that's what I think is so powerful about those books, is like, even though it's so alien and different because it's a different culture, it's also so human. Like, it's just like, we've all seen this and experienced this and like watched this and stuff. And for me too, I also like identified with Lizzie, so I was like, this is great. And now, but it's true, like you said, like reading Sense and Sensibility now is totally different. Watching Pride and Prejudice now is so different. I pick up on so many different things I had no concept of as a little kid. So yeah, it's interesting how classics, you know, can be from a totally different time, but still be so true for us now.
Yeah.
I guess I should read more of them is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that movie is so good. I do prefer the Colin Firth version just because it fits more of the book into it because it's a series. But I think the visuals, like, just as a movie, like the soundtrack and just like, I think that, is it 2005 one? The Keira Knightley one is just like really beautiful. You know, like you could watch it and, like you said, not have anything, not really know what's going on other than it's two people falling in love, and it's just a gorgeous movie. Yeah. You know, and I recently watched
Keira Knightley, come on.
Right? I know. Yeah. What did I watch? I watched Sense and Sensibility. I don't know how many versions there are.
Yeah.
The main one, I want to say, but I don't know. So I watched it, and right after I read it again, and I just wanted to live in the world. Like, I wanted to live in the cottage with Marianne and Eleanor, and like have a Mr. Who's the bad guy? Whatever, you know, the guy, the one that she doesn't end up marrying. But it's so fun because, like, is it Henry? I don't know, whatever his name is, the one that she doesn't end up marrying. But anyway, he would come visit them and hang out with them every day. And I was like, I just want to live there and have these hot Regency gentlemen come and hang out with me every day.
That's really the motivation, is the men. Right. What always goes back to.
Right, I know.
Oh my gosh. But, I mean, why do you think I want to live in Middle Earth? That's
right?
For Aragorn.
Please, oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. So, that's another good one. So, let me look at the books I read. Are there any books you read that you were really in love with the guy?
Ooh, yes.
Because, let's see, I already talked about Prince Cardan and how he kind of grew on me, but another one I read Howl's Moving Castle, which is a children's book, which I wish I had read earlier, but I'm glad I read it now. It is so good. It's so cozy. It is the ultimate cozy read, and I really like Howl. He's super cool. He's like this badass wizard guy. I don't know, but he's kind of like the character that I described in The Black Moth, because he is super concerned with his appearance. He dyes his hair blonde and he dresses up like he's a dandy. He's a total dandy, and he dresses up in these fancy suits, and then he goes to court all these girls.
Oh my gosh.
I can't. But yeah, they have a really cute relationship, and then I watched the movie, and that was cute. Howell was a little bit more manly in the movie, and he was actually really cool in the movie. He has all these different alibis, and at one point they asked him, they asked the main girl, Sophie, they said, well, why does he have so many alibis? And she said, well, he has as many as he needs to be so he can be free, because he's private. You know, he doesn't want everybody tracking him down and knowing all this stuff about him, which in the modern era, I feel like everybody can really relate to that. So the movie, I was like, wow, Howell is so based. Like, this guy, he's so private. He's so concerned about his freedom. And so the movie was really cute too. And yeah, I highly recommend, like, with a cup of tea and a rainy day. The book and the movie are really good. It's just a good comfort read. It's not very stressful. Well, the movie might be a little more stressful because it's different from the book. But yeah, it's super cute, and cute. I really like Howl. Like,
I think you have a type.
I do. I really must. And then Sophie, the main character, is so cute too, because in the movie, she's like, I'm not that pretty, and the only thing I'm good at is cleaning. And I was, well, first of all, she's pretty. So she's just like, she doesn't know she's pretty. And I was just like, Sophie, you're every man's dream. Like, you're good at cleaning, and you're humble, and you're really cute, but you don't know that you're cute. So you're super humble, and you're good at cleaning and taking care of the house. I was like, girl, what are you complaining about?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You're the perfect woman.
About the heroine who is like super pretty and doesn't know she's pretty. And I'm like, you know how common that actually is though in real life? Girls complain about themselves all the time. Even pretty girls are like, oh, I'm so unattractive. And you're like, what are you talking about? You're gorgeous. But they don't think they're gorgeous. It's actually a realistic trope.
It is. I know people say it's unrealistic, but it's realistic in the fact that everybody has insecurities. And, you know, even if there are girls who maybe they might know that they're pretty, like, oh, I'm a pretty person, but they're still always going to be like, well, I don't like this about myself and I don't like that about myself. And they'll always be second guessing themselves on whether they're actually pretty or not, even if they kind of know.
Yeah.
You know?
I always say there's a difference between knowing you're pretty and feeling like you're pretty.
Exactly.
There's a difference. Knowing that objectively someone else might find you attractive, but you feel unattractive. Two different things.
Yeah, I love that trope too because I feel like it's realistic. I know it gets a lot of hate, but you know,
whatever, guys. Fiction is always a little dramatized. That's the point.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was my favorite guy. Did you have a favorite guy from your?
I did. I read it was In Darkness Forged by Ken Lee Davidson. Which she writes fantasy, and like I believe she has a series of fantasy fairy tale retellings too. But she wrote like I think it's gonna be 6-book series where each like the first 2 books are about a certain couple, the second 2 books are about a certain couple, and the last 2 are about a certain couple. And I've read that one, which is not finished yet, but I loved that one. And then she came out with a standalone, and I was like, yes, please. And so I read that first thing this month. And it's about this young girl who lives in a village, and the ruler in the area, her family, like, we used to be seers, so they used to be able to see the future, and she's the first one in her family who can't. And so they've always lived free, like without paying rent or anything, because they could see the future for their ruler. And now that they can't, he's like going to kick them out unless she can go into the territory of the elves and like gain this object that the ruler wants. And so she has no combat experience. She has no ability level. She's very small and like petite and like frail and everything. And she's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but she's very determined. She's like, I'm going to go anyway. So she goes to the night elves and is like, I need to go find this object for my ruler. And the night elves are like, well, we'll give it to you if you'll go into this territory of these monsters and get them to stay in their area or whatever. And she's like, sure, I've got nothing to lose. And so she decides she's going to go, and they're like, but you have to take somebody with you. And they have this prisoner who's also a night elf come out, and they're like, you guys are going to do this together. And this night elf, I cannot remember his name. He has no interest in working with her at all. He's like and that's of course my favorite thing is like the enemies to lovers, grumpy sunshine kind of thing. I just adore it. And he's like, has no interest in working together. He's very like shut down. He does not care about her at all. And so they head off into the woods, and he immediately like leaves her behind in the woods and is like, no, I'm not waiting for you. I'm running. If you can't keep up, you're whatever. And so like he ends up having to save her multiple times. But to her credit, like she pushes herself to her breaking point all the time. And like little by little, he gets more and more impressed with that, even though she's like small and frail and stuff. And so they slowly start to fall in love. And I just really liked, I guess, how the gradual shift for him from the guy who in the beginning was like, he just left her behind in the woods and didn't even care that there was monsters in the area, to the guy who gradually would be like, crap, I'm going to feel guilty about this. So he'd go back and save her. And like, you know, it was grudgingly at first, and then slowly it became, well, I can't let anything happen to her. And he's like having this internal conflict of, why don't I want anything to happen to her? I don't know. I don't want to think about why she matters to me right now, but she does. And I just really like that like gradual kind of like resistance to falling in love or whatever. So it was really cute.
That sounds so good. I'm gonna have to read that book. That sounds really good.
It was good. Although it does have giant spiders in it. So don't read it before bed if you're prone to nightmares.
Oh, I hate spiders.
I do
Like,
too.
ooh.
Yeah. That was my least favorite part, but they weren't in there a ton. So that was
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's giant spiders in Harry Potter, and I still reread those.
Yeah.
So I'll survive.
Yeah.
But
For
yeah.
the man to do it.
I'm trying to think. Is there any more books you want to talk about? Because like I said, I read 17.
Yeah, which is
So
so
I
many.
have like maybe 2 more that I could talk about, but I feel like I said everything, like my favorite things,
Yeah. Same. I mean, there were other ones that I like enjoyed, but those are the ones that I would like really recommend.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say about the other books I read this month, you can read my reviews if you go onto my Goodreads, and sometimes I post them on Instagram too. I know I posted a big long thing about reading bleak fiction because I read 2 books in a row that were kind of more pessimistic, and I posted something about how that affected my mood.
Yeah.
Which is something I want to be more careful of in the future. Like they were both good books-ish.
Yeah.
I think I gave them 3 stars. So they weren't bad, but they weren't my favorite. And going forward, I either want to be more careful or maybe not read 2 back to back. Give myself like a little mood freshener because, and that's the other thing too. I don't think that we should shy away from hard things all the time, but I also don't think there is a reason to ever wallow in it.
Yeah.
So, that's, and
I agree.
I just prefer happy books. That's what I like reading. That's what I like watching. And some people like sad books, and some people, that's all they read too. Some people like crime. I'm not a crime person. I'm not a thriller person.
I will deal with like a death or something sad that happens if the ending is still happy anyway. Like if my main 2 MCs end up happy and okay, then the rest of the world cannot be okay and I'm okay. But if everything just goes to pot, I'm like, nah, I don't like this.
Yeah. And it has to do with like, I think the theme or the tone, there's like an overall feel for books. And you can have a book where, like Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of bad stuff happens in that, but the overall message is very uplifting versus other books like Game of Thrones, for example, because that's what they call that. I don't know if it's classified as grimdark, but there's a trope, not a trope, maybe a subgenre of fantasy where everything is very cynical and jaded and kind of like brutal and like this is how the real world is. And I get that. Like I get Ned Stark, he's the guy, going back to that reel that I posted about, the man who will always do the right thing. I get it in Game of Thrones and in probably the real world. Ned Stark dies because he's the guy who does the right thing. He plays by the rules. And the problem is other people don't. And so a lot of times those kind of people get punished. But I still think there's something to be said of still upholding that in fiction because, especially as Christians, if you're a Christian, yes, you might get killed for doing the right thing, which hopefully in this day and age, I mean, it's not like we're in Rome in the early days of Christianity. There's not a whole lot of martyrdom going on now, but hopefully that doesn't happen. But the thing is, it's better to die for the right reasons because we know like there is something better after this. And I think that message in fiction, to me, it is realistic. And I think that's the difference. I think people who enjoy Game of Thrones and stuff, they don't have that viewpoint. So to them, they look at the world and they're like, this is all that it is. People are awful. People are brutal. But as a Christian or, whatever you are, if you have the kind of viewpoint that this isn't all there is and there's something else out there, that's when these uplifting things become realistic, because we see the brutality, but we also see the other layer of goodness on top of it. And to us, that is reality, because it is. I mean, I'm saying it, so it is reality. And I think that's why I like uplifting fiction, because it adheres to my worldview more so than something that's really jaded and cynical, because I just don't look at the world that way. That's not to say I don't know that awful things don't happen. Of course they do, but I have a different interpretation of it, I guess.
I totally agree, because it's like, we're not ignorant of the depravity in the world and like how dark things can be and how bad people can be. But I guess for me, and especially, I know we're very, very blessed to be in a country where we have so many like conveniences and freedoms and like such ease of things. But at the same time, it's just like, no matter where you're at in the world, there are always good people and there are always good lives. Like, people like to look back on like the early days of life, or like, the medieval days and all this stuff, and talk about how horrible it was. It's like, if you look back historically, a lot of those things were still considered wrong. Like, it's not like rapists were walking around just doing whatever it was still considered wrong. People might have gotten away with it in a different way than they do now, but it's not like everybody and their mother was this horrible, disgusting human being. So I guess that's what I don't like about those books, is that it portrays to me an unrealistic version of fantasy or reality or anything, because not everybody is evil and not everybody is willing to bend their morals. Like, I feel like there's good and bad, and portraying one over the other is always unrealistic, because there are both and they coexist. So it's like, I don't know. I want to see both exist in the same world, not just the bad being so huge.
Yeah, I totally agree, because actually one of the books, the bleak books that I read, was set in the Dark Ages. I think it was 600s. It was called Hild by Nicola Griffith. And it was just that very violent, like grim version of the Middle Ages, which I just don't think, and obviously it depends on your viewpoint, but that's not necessarily the most accurate. Like, just because they didn't have cell phones doesn't mean their life was awful. And yes, things were a little more unstable and violent. That's true. But there's some things about the Middle Ages that really, I don't like how they're portrayed. For example, when you have, the Saxons and the Vikings, so obviously weren't Christians at first. And they're kind of portrayed as this hedonistic people, and they do all these drugs and they have orgies, which I am not a Viking scholar. I'm going to disclaimer. So what I'm about to say might not be entirely accurate, but granted, nobody is around that then. So we're all kind of guessing. Thing is, to me, I look at that as more kind of a modern filter, because we do have a part of our culture that likes to party and do drugs and stuff like that. If you look at the Vikings, just because they weren't Christians didn't mean they didn't have marriage. I mean, they didn't have a Christian priest that married them. And I think generally the marriage was arranged between the father of the bride and the man. And when he took her into the home, that was marriage. But it was still marriage. You know what I mean? They still had a culture with rules. I mean, if you look at the simple fact that they're the last names from Vikings, there's so-and-so's son, like Olaf's son or Ragnar's son. That tells you that marriage was a pretty big deal in the culture, because here's the thing, if everybody's having orgies, you don't know who the father of any of these children are. So that in and of itself tells you that the institution of marriage, whether they were Christian or not, was important in their culture. And if they had that, they had other social, ways of behaving, and it probably really wasn't that much different than, our life today. So I have beef with some historical fiction, because I'm like, really? Come on.
Because they also talk about, like, the way, and I think a lot of it's just like Hollywood trying to make things more dramatic and grittier than they were. They do it with Westerns too, which I don't like either. But like, they'll show, peasants having these really horrible, gritty lives and, all these battles and wars. And I'm like, actually, people didn't like to go to war because their peasants were their working class, and that's how the rulers got their food. So they didn't like to go to war because they could lose the people who make the food, and that was a pretty big priority. And people did wash their hands. They did not have common day soap, but they did understand the importance of cleanliness. And they did brush their teeth. They had different ways of doing it, but they still did. Like, it wasn't the same level that we have now, but they weren't complete idiots. Like, you know, they weren't barbarians. So I don't like the way that Hollywood portrays it. It's very unrealistic. And unfortunately, fiction follows suit, and it's in books too a lot, which is disappointing.
Yeah,
there's unrealistic. With that.
Oh no, yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of people. Yes, there are wars, but there was a lot of people in the Middle Ages who were farmers. Some of them were, because before the Normans came in, I mean, there wasn't the level of serfdom that there came later. I mean, a lot of them were free men. They ran their own farms. They had families. They lived their lives. You know what I mean? They went to work every day, basically just same as we do. Yeah. And that was their life. Yeah. You know, that's not to say, but there's people now who are in war zones, but it's not the whole world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to read an unrealistic version of all that stuff, I'd rather it be a fantastical, whimsical version than something that's really gritty. Yeah,
me too. Like, I'd rather have it be realistic or on the optimistic side. Like, and that's just me. That's just me personally.
Yeah. Preferences, but that is my preference.
Yeah.
Well, that was a rant we didn't mean to go on, but you know.
Maybe we should do a Middle Ages rant because, especially on the cleanliness stuff, I have so much to say. So we might have to save that for the next time, just because we both write in Middle Ages, kind of, because you're doing King Arthur. So that's, which I love that period. And I've written the period like kind of right after that, the Anglo-Saxons. So we should definitely go on like an early history rant sometime.
That would be so much
for now.
fun.
We're talking about
for now. We're gonna keep it focused and like come to an end on this chat because it's now been an hour.
So guys, that's what we read. Let us know what you're reading. Let us know if you've read any of this stuff that we read and what your thoughts were.
Yeah. We would always love to get more book recommendations, so please share.
Yeah. All right. Bye, guys. See you next time.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed it, and tune in next week for another episode. We will see you in the future. Bye.